Hi, Craig Urquhart here, and welcome to another edition of Berlin Conversations. Today I'm very honored to have the cellist conductor Leonard Elschenbroich as my guest. We first met when he won the Leonard Bernstein Award at the Schleswig-Holstein Music Festival. How many years ago was that?
10 years ago?
Was it already 10 years? My
2010,
word.
Yeah.
And
or
you're
9 even. Actually.
Yeah. And my, what a career you've built since then.
Thank you.
It's really quite amazing. You're a cellist primarily, but you also conduct, am I correct? And you're doing more and more conducting.
Yeah, and started only a few years ago and slowly getting...
So let's first talk about your cello performances. You've performed with just about every major orchestra in the world, right?
Well, there's still plenty on
yeah,
that
but
list.
I mean, you've done with London Symphony. Name some of the orchestras you've played with.
So in the US, there was Chicago and National Symphony Orchestra, and Minnesota, and then lots in the UK. Most of the orchestras in the UK, London Philharmonic, and all the BBC orchestras and so on. And then in Germany also with Schatzkapelle Dresden. Here,
That's a wonderful orchestra.
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
So that's great.
So.
And your repertoire is really quite varied, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I play all the standard repertoire really from Bach, I would say, and then with another focus on contemporary music, and also like discovering some concertos that maybe aren't so well known, and repertoire in general that's not played as much. But lately, it's been mostly Beethoven, and then I would say second half of 19th century. And then sort of Soviet 20th century or new music. Yeah,
you did a whole project about Russian music. Correct?
My first 3 albums actually were all 20th century Russian, so starting from Rachmaninoff with his sonata to Schnittke, and in between was Shostakovich and Prokofiev, and Kovalevsky's second cello concerto, which is not very well known, but a real favorite piece of mine. And so that kind of, that whole spectrum of pre-Soviet, Soviet, and then kind of post-Soviet Russian music. That was the first 3 albums I made.
And what label was that on?
That's with Onyx.
Onyx, great, super.
So I've been with Onyx for, I don't know, since 13 or something, and we've made 5, 6 albums now.
Oh my God. And you also champion composers, 20th century, contemporary composers. You commission new works.
Yeah, actually, next week or the week after, I'm doing the German premiere of Mark Simpson's cello concerto that he wrote for me, and we worked really very closely on together. A year ago, 2 years ago, for BBC Phil. So he was the composer in residence with the BBC Philharmonic in Manchester. He's 30 years old. He's a great clarinetist and composer, and one of my favorite, like, young living composers. And he had written a piece before for me for cello and piano, and so we got to know each other that way, and we've played chamber music together. And I really wanted him to write something for cello and orchestra, and it was amazing to be able to be so closely connected with him during the process. And every page he sent me, I would like learn it and play it and record it, and then ask him about this place and that bar.
Oh, so you really collaborated with him.
Really, very closely on every note, and we were constantly changing things until the last minute, even from between like the orchestral rehearsal 2-3 days before the concert to between the dress and the concert, still tweaking something.
Oh, you're very lucky to have a composer that's willing to do that with you.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about somebody that is a friend and someone that's in your that's, you know, he's my age, and that there isn't this. Sometimes there's a kind of reverence towards composers, which isn't really helpful because they actually would like to be the player to be more involved, but we kind of are. It's been indoctrinated into our, you know, by our teachers and stuff, that composers are these wholly untouchable kind of.
Well, we know that's not true.
and they don't want to be that way. Of course, they don't.
That's why I like to write songs for art songs for singers, because I like to work with singers, and then we just sit and, you know, I'll bring them to them. They go, that really doesn't work, you know, and that's not really vocal, you know, and it's just really it's great to be able to work with somebody, and especially when you know the artist, because then you can write for that artist, you know, that personality and that person, And that's really exciting that you
Yeah.
found a composer that wants to do that.
Yeah, that was really, and also I know his music, and I know what. Well, I at least sometimes I think I knew what he wanted it to sound like, but it just wasn't written in the way to sound the way to reach the result or to reach the effect that he wanted. So I said, I think you're looking for this kind of thing, and you go, oh yeah, actually that's it. Well, maybe if we do it this way, and then that's really a collaboration. It's not sort of I'm amending, or manipulating his writing to suit me, but I'm kind of helping him find what I think he's looking for.
Yeah, no, that's really great that you have somebody that's willing to work with you like that, because it's really positive for both of you.
Yeah,
and the end result, I can't wait to hear.
Yeah.
Is it? Have you given the premiere?
So
already?
we did the premiere with BBC Philharmonic, and this is the German, European. You just call it now European premiere.
Oh right, I forgot about Brexit.
With Bremen Philharmonic and their new chief conductor Marco Letonia. Also, I know quite well. We've done quite a lot of things together, so I think I'm in touch with him already and like meeting up in time, and not just sort of the rehearsal and then the dress rehearsal, but actually working on it together and being able to discuss it and me maybe introducing him to that language, because it's a very unusual language that Mark has, and so I really look forward to this second outing, which will be, I think, very different from the first one.
Yeah, well, that's really exciting. So, when did you start playing the cello?
I was 5 when I first started. It's my mother's idea, as is usually the case. And
so you don't come from a musical family, or
my mother she played the piano her whole life. Her father was a pianist and a composer, and he studied composition with Paul Hindemith here, I think, in Berlin, and piano with Edwin Fischer in Cologne, and also with Furtwängler. He studied conductor with Furtwängler and so on. But I didn't know him really well.
Because he must be much older than most parents. Yeah.
So he died. This is my grandfather, my mother's father, when I was 10 or 9 or something. So I was barely playing by the time. I didn't really.
So it was your grandfather.
My grandfather.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, my father is a filmmaker. My mother's a writer. But played the piano. There was always music in the house, and she was playing, and especially early mornings, she would play the piano and so on. But I had no idea what a musician's life is like.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you picked up the cello, or your mother suggested it. Yeah.
But I don't think there was ever any intention of me becoming a cellist. It was just a nice instrument to play and so on. And I never thought about it in that way until when I was 10. I saw the Yehudi Menuhin School orchestra do a concert. And I was amazed. I was amazed that there's a group of young people that are all musicians that are like friends and that play together and live together. And because I didn't have any musicians in my class or like in my year, so music was always something that took me away from my friends, and there's something that was more associated with my parents or my grandparents. And that
it can be a very solitary life.
Yeah. And so it was something I enjoyed, but it was always something of a kind of a chore at the same time, or an effort. And then I saw that these kids just it was so obvious on stage that they're really good friends and that they all live for music. And I didn't know that existed. And then I immediately said, I want to go to the school. And so I left home. I went to it's a boarding school in England when I was 11. And then that's when I became really serious about music.
And then when did you start on your solo career?
Well, I mean, I started playing concerts quite early. I was doing recitals and so on when I was in those years, and then I left that school already at 15, and then I guess I started doing concerts then. I mean, the time when we met, when the Bernstein Award, things happened very quickly around that time. It was like, I just finished college, I think, in 2008, and then I was so Anne-Sophie Mutter has a foundation, and she always had 1 or 2 cellists, mostly violinists, but 1 or 2 cellists in the foundation. She took me into that foundation. She introduced me to a lot of conductors, and Christoph Eschenbach was one of those conductors, and so I played for Christoph, and then he invited me to do concerts with him and concertos and recitals and so on, that was the connection also with the Schleswig-Holstein
Right,
Festival
yeah.
and the Bernstein Award. So it was around those years actually that things suddenly I started performing more, and so I was what, 22 or something around that time, 23.
Yeah, and you've worked with a lot of great conductors. You've worked with Christoph Eschenbach, Mark Elder, and name some more, because you got quite a list.
Well, there was Bichkov and
Simon,
Honeck, and I'm just thinking of the ones that sort of came through those auditions at those times. Kitayenko, and then I was also drawing a blank, but I mean, there's lots of wonderful conductors out there.
Yeah, no, it's great. So great orchestras, great conductors, solo career. Do you do recitals also?
Yeah, I've been playing mostly with Alexei Grinyuk for now like 12 years. We've been playing together, and we just released all Beethoven sonatas on an album.
This is the Beethoven year.
Yeah, so we did it just last year and 6 months ago or something, and because we've been playing them all, that was the first thing we did, was to play the 5th sonata, and then I just was so fascinated by his playing that I thought we really should do more together. And then it became our favorite rep to do all 5 in one night. That's like our...
Oh, that's quite an evening. Yeah, that's great. Have you done that here in Berlin?
We did it, yes, at the Cristofori.
Oh, right.
Salon.
I wasn't here.
Yeah,
I was away. I remember that.
Yeah, we did it. I think it was a launch actually, and we've done it lots of places, and especially this year, of course, with this anniversary.
So you're playing all the Beethoven sonatas now, and that's really exciting.
Yeah,
especially for the Beethoven year.
Yeah.
And so that's cool. So what do you like about the Beethoven sonatas? I know that's a really tough question. What do you say?
Yeah.
I mean,
but I mean, I think the experience of playing all the 5 sonatas live is quite different from playing any other repertoire, because one, because we've been playing them for so long, and because it's such a, it almost feels like one great work, what sort of 5 volumes of a work. It really has that sort of narrative. Of course, it wasn't conceived that way. They're written in 3 different parts of his life, but it's sort of like an opera in 5 acts or something, in terms of the development, the emancipation of the cello from a more accompanying kind of instrument, the early ones, to a much more individual and much more exposed instrument, and the whole process of his early writing style, middle writing style, late writing style, and the way it culminates with this 5-voice double fugue, and in the early sonatas it's very nice to be able to step back actually and sort of accompany in a way the piano, because it's a very virtuosic concerto-like piano writing, and I really enjoy opening the concert that way, that I get to sort of experience and accompany and witness Alexei's playing, and then slowly the cello emerges more and more and comes to the fore, and then we're more equal by the end of it. And it's quite a long, I mean, it's 2 hours of music, and it's very dense music, so it feels more of an event than playing 3 sonatas from 3 different composers or something.
Well, it is an event.
It is, yeah. I think
it's a journey. It's a journey. What's the first opus number?
5.
5, and then the last opus number?
102.
Yeah, and so that spans an incredible period. I mean, because the early works are very classical, and the late works they're in a whole different realm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And another thing is that, we love playing Rachmaninoff Sonata, for example. That's been one of our favorite pieces, but we've always had to take breaks from it every now and then. It's like after a dozen times, we'd be like, we need 2 years off of this piece now. As much as we love it, it's becoming stale, or we can't hear it fresh anymore. And that never happens with this. For some reason, it never happens with Beethoven. It's almost like embarrassing for us to say it every time, but every time we have to be like, I can't believe it's new again. It's just always new. It's always, there's never enough of Beethoven.
Right. I mean, I love Beethoven. And then people say, why Beethoven? And it's hard to, why Beethoven? It's because it's great music. That's why. And it's always full of surprises.
Yeah. No, it's almost like the burden's kind of on anybody else. Why anybody else than Beethoven? It's.
So as an artist, What is your day like? I mean, you know, many people don't understand what it is artists or cellists or pianists do. Besides, do you just practice all day, or how does that work for you? What's your process?
Well, I think there are two parts of life. There's tour and home, and they're quite different. Tour is maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the time. The home is kind of the exception. Now I'm home in Berlin, so of course, because let's say now I'm home for 5 days, but so there is this sense of processing the tour that's just passed and preparing for the next one. So most of it is like that. But then maybe there's a little window in between when I really feel like I've arrived and I'm just here, and then it's a chance. Well, I would practice and I would read music and I would listen to the pieces that I'm going to learn, and but I also here I get to catch up with friends that I don't see on tour, because touring life isn't lonely, but it's not, you know, you meet new people and it's exciting and so on, but you're away from your friends and family, of course, so it's nice to, and I'm always so happy to reconnect with Berlin also. Like I really try to just to be like on the U-Bahn or just to walk around and just like see different parts.
Well, that's always one of my questions. So how did you end up in Berlin, and why Berlin?
It's funny, I lived in London for 10 years, and
and where are you from originally?
I'm German. I'm from Frankfurt originally. Okay. I grew up in Germany, went to boarding school in England, then went back to Germany, and then just decided to move to London. Because that's where I had a trio there at the time, and my girlfriend was there, and a lot of friends and a lot of connection I felt with England.
And the musical life in London is really exciting also,
It is. But it's also very stressful, it's very hectic, it's very pressured, and London, I mean, Berlin is big, but London is just so...
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So you don't actually... a lot of my friends will have the same... Unless you are living next door to somebody, a friend of yours, you don't really see friends much, or very briefly only. There isn't really a social life because the distances are so huge, and because the pressure to just work and do concerts and do things is so high, which I felt when I was visiting Berlin for recitals, or I remember I was doing like a press thing or something. I spent a day going between the East radio and the West radio and so on, and just driving around and seeing how relaxed everything was whilst being vibrant. So it's not like dormant or less exciting than it is in London. But it doesn't have this stressful kind of feel to it. People seem to have time to enjoy their lives, to look around, to do things, and I thought I missed this in my life. And that was 4 years ago. And quite spontaneously, I just left. I just came. I didn't even I just wanted like a temporary place. I found checked temporary something apartments online. Just chose a place.
That's how I did it first too. Yeah.
And actually, ended up staying in that apartment for 4 years because I really liked the neighborhood. That was Schlesische Store. So that's the kind of really hipster kind of new sort of graffiti and
it's
And I really
it's an interesting It was the furthest part of West Berlin.
Right.
It was the wall it ran up against the wall.
And I just enjoyed how much time people had to be in the moment, and but eventually, I never spent so much time in Berlin. So for me, it was always a fun place to come back to. But eventually, I did realize that like anywhere else, it's a thing. It has a style and represents a certain lifestyle, which is a little bit manufactured at this point. Like it's not as maybe authentic as it would have been 20 years ago, something like that. So I moved now to Wedding, which is very different, which is much less trendy and cool and sort of more very real in that sense. It's just people. It's not a statement, I think, to live there. Nobody's choosing to live there to represent a certain ethos or something. It's just somewhere you live. But it's very, very mixed. And I like it. I really like it there. And I'm always...
I lived in New York for 43 years, and I finally settled here after going back and forth. And I found that the difference for me was that in New York, people live to work. And here people work to live. Because we find time to have a coffee with a friend. And it's a big city, but the public transportation is so good. You're no more than 20 minutes from anybody. And you don't have to plan 6 weeks in advance to see somebody. So that's just how I feel about it. Berlin's a cool city.
It is. I really think so.
It's good. And it has such a great musical life too, and now Christoph is here, and that's exciting. And I like being able to see Christoph Elschenbroich on a more personal basis more often, because he loves to tour, as you know.
No, it's great. I haven't seen him rehearse here yet. I've seen him do concerts, but I want to see some rehearsals, and I go to a lot of rehearsals at the Philharmonie, especially Berlin Phil rehearsals, because I have friends in the orchestra.
Yeah, of course you do.
But also Deutsches Symphonieorchester, I watch them rehearse sometimes. That's very interesting for me as a musician, as an aspiring conductor, and so on, to watch the rehearsals with these great conductors coming in.
And I was just, as a consumer of music, I'm so spoiled because we have the Berlin Phil, we have the Radio Orchestra, the DSO, the Concerthouse Orchestra. It's just amazing. And it's amazing, they all have their different audiences too, and they all have different repertoire. So it's so varied, and it's great. I really, and the 3 opera houses. How can you go wrong? So you also have a very interesting project that you're doing in Bolivia. Could you tell us about that? And why Bolivia?
By chance. I mean, I was touring in Latin America, and somebody asked me to make a stop in Bolivia to meet with a group of young musicians. And it was actually it was the first stop on I think it was my first tour in Latin America, so I didn't know anything about that whole continent of South America. And I thought, I knew about the Sistema in Venezuela, of course. That was already, this was like 10 years ago already. That was when that was the big news kind of thing. And I thought but this was much more informal. It was really a group of young musicians, as it was explained to me, 20 musicians. And they would like to work with me. And so I went, and I was jet lagged, and I just came from a concert in Cologne. And I just played Saint-Saëns Concerto, and they wanted also to do the Saint-Saëns Concerto. And so I arrived for the rehearsal, and I was so amazed by their commitment and their energy and their drive and their desire for music that I almost fell off my chair. I mean, it was really, I'd never heard anything like that before. And I was sort of looking around, like, who's organizing all this? Like, who's the sort of the older personality that's put these musicians together? And there wasn't anybody. These kids really, I mean, they were between maybe 17 and 23 or something. They just got together themselves, and they just did put together this orchestra and rented this venue and made huge posters and sold tickets, and did the whole thing. And that's very different from the Sistema, because of course Sistema, as great as it was really one man's creation. Abreu's creation, who had seen music played on that level in other parts of the world and wanted to bring that to his country. But this was just really grassroots, from the bottom up, like, we want this for ourselves. And I saw that, it's such a remote part of the world, even for Latin Americans, they don't go to Bolivia.
But where in Bolivia were you?
This was in Santa Cruz, which is the kind of the commercial capital. Now that we're based in Cochabamba, which is a smaller city in the middle of the country. But in the audience was Christine Rombeck, who's the managing director of the Hilti Foundation, which has been supporting the Sistema in Venezuela for many years. And so she was all equally impressed by this whole project. And I just remember saying to the audience, like spontaneously after the concert, at the concert, that I'm going to be supporting this as best I can. And it grew so quickly. I mean, it was unbelievable from these 20 kids. I think in the 4th year, they did the first ever Mahler symphony in Bolivian soil. You know,
that's incredible.
Mahler 1.
And you conducted, right?
I didn't conduct that one, but
okay.
I've conducted them with other things. We just did the Eroica Symphony, and we're doing Tchaikovsky 6 in June, and I've of course played with them as a soloist with Miguel Salazar, who's the founder. He was conducting, but the orchestra is how I kind of got into conducting, because I can't go there so many times because mainly because it's expensive to get there, and their budgets are it costs too much. But when I go, I wanted to reach as many of the musicians as I could, and of course I can't teach 90 musicians in, I mean, maybe for 10 minutes, but then I thought, if I can rehearse them, if I can conduct them, then I can work with all the musicians all the time, all day long, and then and impart more onto more people. So that's how that started, actually. And then I realized how much I enjoyed conducting, and then I started having conducting lessons with various people, and so then in the meantime, we also have a close collaboration with Medellin in Colombia, which has a very good orchestra. They in turn have one with Miami, with the New World Symphony
of Michael Tilson Thomas.
So in a way, what Miami is to Medellin is to us. It sort of works like that.
That's great. Yeah. Have you been to the New World?
I've been to the New World, and many of our teachers also have been to the New World. So they exchange.
I had no idea, because I've known Michael for 35 years or more. He's an old friend.
I see.
And I remember when the New World got started. I was working with Bernstein at the time, and he made a stop going from Key West to Miami just at the very beginning, and conducted the first year there.
Okay.
Yeah, really? So it's a small world.
Yeah. No, they've spent a few weeks there, and they've learned enormous amounts, and they loved it there.
Michael's a wonderful teacher, and it's an incredible setup they have in Miami.
Yeah, the building is amazing.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is it's a wonderful success story that I'm now pretty much accompanying from the sidelines, because it's really taken off. I mean, I go twice a year, and they're in touch with me about repertoire, and I recommend soloists. They're going on a tour in April. I've just got didn't take much convincing. I just asked a friend to go, and of course they don't have those connections. They can't find those people. But in terms of the daily rehearsals and the recruiting of locals, and it's working really well. So it's so nice how quickly that's developed, and how.
What an exciting project, and it's sort of in the spirit of Yehudi Menuhin. You went to the Menuhin school.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's kind of interesting that was instilled in you in some subconscious way. And so that's amazing. So when did you realize and fall so much in love with music that you want to dedicate your whole life to it?
I think it was when I came to Menuhin school. I never thought about it in that way before that, but then I saw how committed everybody was to music, and I realized that actually I was too. I just hadn't been given that opportunity, or just wasn't kind of awakened yet. But then I realized that that's what I wanted, and so I was 11.
That's 11. To make a decision that forever changed your life. And what an exciting life you have. And to be able to make music on such a high level. And you are a wonderful cellist. And I'm really honored that you were here.
Thanks.
And that you found the time and to come and speak with me.
Oh, my pleasure. That's
okay,
really nice.
Great. I never thought 10 years ago, or whenever we've met, you'd be here and we'd be having this conversation. So that's really exciting. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Berlin Conversations. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. And please be sure you subscribe to the channel and like it and share it with your friends. And please visit my website, www.craigurquhart.com. So thank you for joining us, and all the best.